As Christina alluded to, I'm with Nuheat. I run Nuheat. I've been with them a long time, 20 years. I did a Bachelor of Commerce at UBC in marketing and then joined Nuheat as their sales team of one. At the time, we were a small manufacturing business in Surrey with two guys manufacturing the stuff, a general manager and an accountant. So I answered the phones and everything else in between. So hopefully our growth can inspire you. If a little floor heating company out of Surrey can do it, I assure you our elevator pitch was never as polished as any of yours was. In fact, we're just getting to that. We heat floors and freeze protect homes and businesses. This is what we do. So a lot of that growth came from our sales team and selling efforts and from distribution. Thank you. So my object today is to give you concrete selling and distribution ideas to take into your business that you can act on Monday. So I was tickled when Lisa and Christina asked me to speak on sales because nobody really speaks on sales, and sales is a really misunderstood domain. When you consider the universities don't teach sales, they leave it to the technical institutes like BCIT at best. Parents don't encourage their children to pursue a career in sales. It's a little different in the States where I lived for 6 years, but here I'd say it's safe to say they don't. And we come up with all kinds of euphemisms for sales, ways of avoiding the word sales, like it's a scatological kind of word. We call it market development or prospecting or rainmaking or marketing. So it's not, marketing isn't sales. They're two completely different disciplines, but we call it because we're afraid of the word sales. So if nothing else, maybe I can deconstruct that word for you and make you feel good about it because I'm passionate about it. So you are entrepreneurs, and I sense a lot of powerful saleswomanship in this room. So we're going to start with a quick exercise, and I'm going to have you number off. So if you could go, remember if you're a 1 or a 2, and start 1, and then just number all the way around. All right, so all the ones, please pick up your pen. If you've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, you have a heads up on this exercise. You have 30 seconds, no more, 30 seconds, the ones, to sell the 2s, your pen. Go. All right, time's up. Time's up. Your career in selling pens, has come to an end. I hope it was fun. My questions are for the 2s. So these were the people that were being sold the pens to. The prospects, the customers. Who was asked what they're looking for in a pen? Who was asked if they, okay, very good. Who was asked if they use a pen? Who was asked what, okay, wow. Who was asked what color of ink they use in a pen? If they had any, who was asked questions at all? All right, so we have, all right, someone who was asked a question. What were some of the questions you were asked, or any question you were asked?
I was asked if I knew what that was, what the pen was.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we'll give that a little weak, but we'll give that. And what was the question you were asked?
Do you like using a pen?
Do you like using a pen? Okay, so this leads to the #1 challenge of professional salespeople, which is they do not ask questions and listen. So it was a simulated exercise. Of course, you were kind of under time pressure. But from 20 years of sales experience, I know this to be true, that they don't, and so we call it ACALing in our office because we've done this, we do this with all kinds of new recruits. So why is it important that we ACAL? Or why is it important to ask your prospects or your customers questions and then listen? To uncover needs, boom, we're done. People don't want to be sold to. So another question for the 2s, was anybody subjected to a feature dump? Yes, right.
That's good, though.
Yes. Was anyone subjected to the spray and pray? Yes. So if you've been in the sales game of selling your product and service, you're familiar with that. It can be a panicky feeling, and it doesn't need to be. If you've ever been on the receiving end of buying something significant or that's meaningful, and it was a wonderful process, it was likely because someone asked questions and listened to you and took you in a direction that you weren't expecting. If you're only going to take one thing away, write down ACAL. And what I'd like you to do is write down one question you will ask a prospect or a customer on Monday or as soon as you were exposed to them? So write down one question, then I want to hear from you. If a cal doesn't work for you because a U doesn't follow the Q, consider wait. Ask yourself, why am I talking? Not a bad thing to ask when we get into the selling game of our products or services. Why am I talking? Also useful for just working with staff in general. All right, let me tell you a little bit about the Nuheat growth story. We are, as we said, a Vancouver-based operation. Something incidentally that I don't feel like we do as good a job as we ought to in terms of, you knew, I'm assuming we were Canadian-owned and operated, so I'm pleased to say that we're Vancouver-owned and operated. And as I said when I started there, we were a very modest operation with me as the receptionist, as the inside sales, as customer service, data entry, design, and outside sales as we grew into it. And outside of Vancouver, the first place we went to was Seattle, for no other reason than it was closer and easier to drive to than the next major market, Calgary or Edmonton. In particular, at the time, the exchange rate was really favorable for us. And there was also just a feeling that Vancouverites are very comfortable with Seattle. I'm actually reading Howard Schultz's second autobiography, something called Onward, which is a really inspirational read about when he took over as CEO, came back into the position of CEO, so got back into operations at the beginning of 2008. And I was reminded that their first store outside of Seattle was Vancouver. So there's that intimacy there, is my only point. After that, we started traveling down to San Francisco. So 2 of our salespeople were flying down twice a month. And the reason for that is it was the same time zone, so it seemed like it made sense. We sell into the residential housing market, and obviously San Francisco is a massive market, in particular with a big high-end component and lots of disposable income, which is the kind of clientele that spends money on heated floors. And it was also, and there was the exchange rate and those considerations. So not overly scientific. We didn't write a white paper on it. There was a little bit of gut and sense of smell. But we worked our way through it prudently, and once it was paying for itself, we moved on. Next was Chicago, and a couple key things happened in our growth here. And that was that by this point, we had a thriving, smaller business in Vancouver. And part of what was special about our business, and is likely special about your business, is that you've created a culture, and it's got its own unique sensibility. And the best definition I've heard of business culture is the unwritten rules in business. What isn't in the handbook? What's the sense you get when you walk into the business? Or what's the sense you get from the founder or the entrepreneur? So we had something special that we wanted to export. And we set up a sales manager from Vancouver in San Francisco and a sales manager from Vancouver into Chicago. And subsequently, that led to the current distribution model that we have here. So in some cases like Toronto, we've got 4 people. In smaller markets like Minneapolis, we just have 1 person. If they're not in Vancouver, they work out of home offices. And this is how we've built our distribution model across North America. Several years ago, we still have a guy named Rich McElroy, who's the former president of Solder Industries on our board. And Rich was banging his shoe on the boardroom table for years saying that if Nuheat's serious about growing the Boston to DC corridor, with that 100 million person population and its old housing stock and all kinds of money, your management team is on the wrong country, on the wrong coast. And my wife and I got to a stage in life where we kind of got that, and we were done we had 3 children, and we were up for the adventure. So 6 years ago, we relocated to the New York area, and I led the sales team from there. And I bring that up because when any of your businesses are looking at expansion or considering expansion, a lesson that we learned that I hear in so many branch businesses, so any business that has a head office in one place and branches another place, is branch fatigue, let's call it. And exporting culture, shipping management out to culture, you traveling out to the remote outpost of the business is really critical in terms of keeping the quality of the team high. I inherited a really underperforming team. In terms of exporting the culture, we didn't ship someone like we had. It took years to ship me because we couldn't convince someone to move to the East Coast at that point. And since then, I've come back in the role of president, and I've left a really thriving culture in place there. So those are my points on the Nuheat story. And my question for you is, what's your plan to build your sales function? This could be hiring someone to do more sales. If you're a one-woman show, it could be investing in sales training. It could take a geographic perspective. You could be dividing up the Lower Mainland into territories. It could be expansion out of BC or international markets. Please just take a moment now to think about what's my next step for my sales function, and then we'll hear a little bit from you. Fantastic. So I think regardless of where you are or what your business looks like, it's why, let me rewind to my pitch for thinking about sales. Even if you're a CA, you will concede that sales drives revenue. Revenue is the top of every income statement. It's critical. Without the revenue, the business dies. So spend some time thinking about your plan and your vision for your selling function, whatever form that takes for your business. So what I don't enjoy when I have speakers is when they tell me how perfect they are and how great their businesses are, and they don't share mistakes. In fact, I was with John Rose at this 50 Best Managed function once, and I had this wonderful moment where I asked these investment bankers who were just telling us how great they were about a deal they'd done which just went sideways on them and what they learned from it, because I find mistakes much more instructional and more interesting, frankly. So, man, it was crickets chirping for just like an uncomfortable period of time. And then he served up a couple of, non-mistakes, sort of like, bad interview answers when someone asks what your faults are. So I'm here to open my kimono and tell you all about my mistakes, starting with hanging on to salespeople. So this is as it relates to the sales function, hanging on to them for too long. So if you have staff or have had staff in previous careers, I'm willing to bet that there was someone you hung on to too long for on your team before you helped them to the competition. If you don't have staff, no doubt you've worked with someone who ought to have been relieved of their duties long before they were, if they ever were. In fact, I'd even be willing to bet that some of you are entrepreneurs and started your own business because you got tired of working with those jerks. So why do we hang on, or why did I hang on to salespeople for too long? Number one is that we're intimidated by the dark arts of salespeople ourselves. So I'll use a different example because it's less personal and better. A friend of mine in New Jersey had a case business that had foam on the interior of them, so cameras, rifle scopes, anything that was fragile that needed to be transported went inside these things. He inherited the business from his father and inherited some old type salespeople as well, and just couldn't bring himself, despite all the signals being that they ought to be gotten rid of promptly, couldn't bring himself to do it because he was just spooked by sales. And the reality was he knew his product cold, he was curious and had an easy way about it, and would have been a natural. But it was a way where they were just blocked. And again, because no one talks about sales and it's not taught in the universities, I do find it's misunderstood, and just don't be intimidated by it. Lesson number one. Number two is we overestimate a salesperson's ownership of the customer. So the first person I released was a guy named Larry down in Portland. Larry clearly wasn't our guy, and when John and I went down to let him go, I was really nervous about introducing the new salesperson to our tile distributor down there, because he'd actually referred Larry to us in the first place, and Larry had, as you'd expect, a great relationship with this account. The surprise for me when I brought in the new guy was that the relationship between the two businesses really superseded any kind of personal relationship, and it was a powerful lesson for me early on that the company is bigger than any one business, and the company is definitely bigger than any one salesperson. Number three, less specific to sales, is that we rationalize. Letting people go is a messy, wretched, stress-inducing business, and we will likely do anything we can to avoid the heavy lifting of engaging with the challenge. Depending on how questions went, if anyone really wanted to get vulnerable and had someone that they needed to part company with, I thought we could role play that afterwards. It seems like it's fairly high stakes, but I could play the prospect, I could play you. I've been told I play both roles exceedingly well. All right, number two, hiring based on time pressure versus fit. So if you have customers baying at you in Toronto because they're not hearing back, if you have salespeople furious with you because leads are getting stolen by the competition or competitors are taking market share, there's all kinds of reasons to feel pressure to boost up your sales function. I have learned the hard way that is never a good decision. So for all the reasons that you don't hire anyone based on fit, it really applies to sales. And there's so much, I think sales is different in some ways because once you've hired a salesperson, they become the extension of you that goes out and represents your company. You put all kinds of time into training them. And if you have to release them after 3 to 6 months because you come to terms with, I've made a terrible mistake, it's just, it's even worse. So that's the second mistake. Number 3 is being seduced by style over substance. So why does this happen with professional salespeople? Well, that's what they do. So there's a very good chance that they look good and that they sound good and that they tell a good story, even if they've been bouncing around in different companies, because you're like, yeah, that sounds like a natural career transition to have worked for 9 companies in 9 years. I get it. Or you're really a go-getter because, that wasn't working. One of the things, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, is that I found hiring salespeople can be a really emotional process, thinking about them as the extension of you and your brand out there. So using some kind of testing or personality profiling, that matches the profile of sales has been huge for us. We've been going down the garden path. Please go ahead.
I'm just wondering, is it like a Myers-Briggs personality that's perfect for sales, and if so, what it is?
So it's not Myers-Briggs. So Myers-Briggs is personality profiling that can give you feedback. This is specifically called the CPQ assessments. I can email this to you afterwards. I know my coordinates are going to be emailed out. It's about $120 a throw. It's a guy down in the States somewhere. It doesn't matter where he is, because all you do is you email the prospect a link. You let them know it takes 20 to 30 minutes to fill it out, and then you go in once they've done their profile, and you set it against inside sales, salesperson farmer, salesperson hunter, distinctions we can get into later, and it gives them a number ranking. And his advice was, I never hire below 40 in this case. 40 is high performers. And what it's done for us, we've gotten some false positives, meaning we've hired people that it indicated you ought to. But oh my God, it has saved us from turkeys that we just were getting romanced by, and we're so happy that when we came up with a more robust line of questioning, we didn't hire. So those things should never be more than 1/3 of the hiring decision, but they can inject some objectivity in what can be a really subjective dance. All right, so continuing with the best practices, number 1 is to invest in dedicated sales, but prudently. So before my time at Nuheat, they spent significant funds for a company of that size on the sales and marketing function. And I'm sure you've felt your own pressure to invest in sales or to invest in sales tools, to invest in marketing. And you can hemorrhage money, and it may work out, but it may be a bit like rolling the dice. So what so many businesses don't do, and what's taken us a while to figure out, is discerning cause and effect. So if I hire a salesperson and train them in a certain way and show them what to do, at what point does the incremental revenue exceed their cost? Or what point do they start to pay for themselves? Or if I hire a customer service person, do I see the leads increasing? This is, no one has an exact formula for this, but it's really, I can't recommend strongly enough to think about the relationship between cause and effect so that when you are investing in the sales function, you're investing wisely. And absolutely, it's okay to make mistakes or to say, I'm going to try this because I don't know what the effect is, but be mindful of the effect and change tack if you need to. Number 2 is related to the previous point, and you've heard the maxim, hire slowly and fire quickly. Boy, I've learned it year after year after year. I think if you look around at other businesses, by the way, it's very easy to see how other people should be hiring slower and firing faster. Sometimes it's a little harder when you look at your own business. because we get attached to people and because we think it's hard, or maybe we don't have the language, or maybe we don't want to be jerks. Consider, and again, many of you have been there in professional careers before being an entrepreneur, when you remove in particular a toxic person or a low performer from your group, what it does for the DNA and of the rest of the team, and what it does to raise the spirits of the team, because somebody recognizes that someone else wasn't pulling their weight. So one other tip I've gotten that has never let me down is when it comes to interviewing for the sales function, have 3 different people interview them in 3 different places at 3 different times. So that could be as simple as in an office and in a boardroom. It could be in a Starbucks as well as in your office. If you're a small operation or a one-woman show, it could be someone on your advisory council. It could even be a friend, but someone to help you out with your blind spots and to give you some contrarian perspective. Because if there's one thing we know, it's that nobody's perfect. So let's not pretend anyone is when we hire them. Let's try to get clear on the areas for improvement and areas for development. Questions, comments, horror stories you want to share? Yes.
I'm just wondering if you mean literally 3 different times, like times of day, or do you just mean not all in order?
The latter, right? Not in sequence, 3 different. And that feels, it's crazy when you consider how much you invest in someone on your staff for how long. That can feel onerous, like 3 different meetings, but that's definitely because you can get them on a good day, you can get them on a bad day, you can get them in a different environment. I remember you can get them in a restaurant. We had one salesperson that we were interviewing who we met for dinner, and she'd ordered a glass of wine for herself beforehand before we got there. And it was gauche, it was bad manners, and it was something we absolutely wouldn't have got, and just started, things started to unravel for there because we took a more robust line of questioning and discerned some, maybe some bad judgment there. So those are the kind of things that can present themselves. Okay, best practices number 3, support sales mindfully. So in my bonus material, I have a line which is, a desk is a terrible place from which to view the world. If you have a sales function, or if you have a showroom, or if you have a front of the shop and the back of the shop, and you're in the back of the shop, please be mindful of decisions that you're making from your office or where you're not exposed to your customers. Get out with your sales function, talk to your customers, engage with your customers. In this electronic age, everyone here could probably very happily or very busily spend 8 to 10 hours per day simply sending email and responding to email, and nothing would get done. So get out and support your sales function. All right. Distribution. So Nuheat is an electric blanket that's installed when you're renovating your kitchen or your bathroom. So it's very thin. When you're putting down tile or stone or marble, you put our product down. The electrician hooks it up, the tile setter installs it. As such, there's 2 natural channels of distribution, ceramic tile wholesale or flooring, and electrical wholesale. Electrical wholesale is where electricians buy light switches, pot lights, fans, and floor heating. So this is just some pictures of our product being merchandised at an outfit called Evergreen Oak in Chicago, Illinois. And that is some of our outdoor product, and that is some of our indoor product, some of our merchandising there. So again, I wanted to start with mistakes and my hard lessons learned before I got into some best practices. So the first thing that took me years to learn is what distribution isn't. So I say this respectfully, and please feel free to push back on me here, but distribution isn't an extension of your sales force. Distribution, or someone else that's wholesaling your product, has too many products that they represent and too many lines. And if you're a new supplier with them, there's simply no way that they can get as fluent in your product or company to sell nearly as effectively as you can or someone on your team can. And I felt like we bumped up against distribution for years because we got mad at them because they weren't selling for us. And the reality was some people were sort of selling heroically, and we called them Nuheat champions, and those are special types that really take a liking to the sales rep or the company, or just because they want to be that new product expert. But it's not the norm. So what distribution is to us is that they're a conduit for meeting our target customer, which is the contractor that does most of his work in high-end residential construction. an electrician, or a tile trade. What they also are is a convenient place for said electrician to pick up our product. This is the pictures you saw. It's either in Richmond, which is where our current warehouse facility is, or in our warehouse in Blaine, Washington, or in Tennessee. That's not Chicago. And if a contractor needs product in Chicago today, he can get it from Evergreen Oak. So number one is they provide us access to their customers. Number two is they provide a convenient place to pick up our product physically. And number three is that they provide us a degree of credit protection or against the risk of their client defaulting. And there's a lot of electricians and a lot of small businesses out there, as this team well knows, that will go out of business at some point. And that's a very real value to us for our distributor. The earlier session today actually picked up on that question of customers. And they say, so you just ask for their customers? And we do. And it's an intimate question, but I remember my first experience was with Glenn McMillan, the purchasing manager at Westburn Electrical Wholesale House. And I said, well, gosh, would you show me who's buying Nuheat? And he said, yes, it's confidential, so please respect that. And there was the list of everyone that had purchased Nuheat in the last year, their margins, their sell price, which was really, he really didn't have to share. And that provided me with my first sense for who my customers were. So the question is, what is your distribution if you have it? Getting clear on what they are and what they aren't. Number two is less is more. I was in the field with our Seattle sales guy 2 weeks ago, and I was reviewing our sales report. And as I said, it was the first place we went. So we've been in that market for 20 years, and as such, distribution has grown and grown and grown. And for anyone that's looking to build their business, more exposure is sexier. More places displaying your product, more potential spokespeople out there, more potential sources of leads. But what you also know is that you can get overwhelmed by leads, and leads are no good to you if you're not closing them and turning them into business. So this is as simple as a piece of common sense, which is the one guy in Seattle can only do so much, and I would much sooner have him focused on his top 5 distributors than spreading him too thin with the hopes of a home run from someone. Finally, number 3, can anyone remind me what's the number 1 challenge of professional salespeople?
Ask questions and listen.
They don't ask questions and listen. So when our guys are going to distribution, this is a lesson that they need to revisit time and time again, because it's easy to get into a shtick about why they ought to be stocking, what they ought to be doing better, why they're not doing a good job. And their distribution is our customer. They in turn sell to a contractor who in turn sells to a homeowner, but they're the first customer. And if we're not asking them, so how's it going with Nuheat? How are you feeling about the margins that you're making? How are you feeling about the support? What are your customers saying about Nuheat? These are all things that can create a meaningful conversation, but that we haven't necessarily done a great job with. Questions or comments? Okay, so best practices with distribution. I don't know if this concept of the double dip will relate to all of your businesses, but it's just so clever that I had to share it with you. So Craig Rawlings was our first sales guy in Toronto. He's now our Eastern Canada sales manager. And a lot of what we do is we go directly to job sites. We'll cold call job sites. We'll get referrals from different contractors to go to job sites. So we'll negotiate deals in some cases. A big sale for Nuheat, a really big sale for Nuheat, would be a $10,000 sale. What we do in those cases is that we build in a margin for distribution. Let's say in this case, in this job site in Toronto, it's a $3,000 or 30-point margin for the distributor. What we're effectively doing when we go to the distributor is saying, I need a PO from you for $7,000, which you in turn are going to sell for $10,000, giving you a $3,000 profit margin. What I would like you to do with that $3,000 gift I just gave you is invest in Nuheat inventory, because you don't have it on the shelf, because you don't have our cable kit on our shelf, because you don't have enough of our thermostats on your shelf. And what the salesperson gets is a second PO. What the distributor gets is more inventory on the shelf and the promise of an energized sales guy that's going to sell it. The contractor's happy, the end user's happy. It's a wonderful way to take a more aggressive approach to work that you may be doing already, closing business on someone in your distribution chain's behalf. Number 2, what drives your business? So our guy in Seattle, he's relatively new, so he's keen, and there's a lot to do when it comes to distribution. There's opening up distribution, there's data entry around them, there's updating contacts, there's POP, there's merchandising, there's stock investment. But what we've gotten clear on, as I said, is who our target customer is, and that's the contractor that does work in high-end residential construction. And the best thing we can do is talk to more of those people. So the best thing he can do is ask for those leads or network. My question for you is, which customer drives your business, and what's the highest and best use of your sales team or your sales function or you when you're selling? So who is the customer that drives your business, or what drives your business? Take a moment to think about that, and then I want to hear back from you. Yes? Remind me of your business?
We're a preschool.
Got it. Okay, so Montessori preschool, right? Okay. So who drives that purchasing decision?
Usually it's mom.
Mother. Of course it's mother. It's the same person, by the way, who drives the floor heating decision. The couple comes by at the home show, the woman puts her hand on a heated tile and says, "Oh my God, I want this." The husband says something stupid like, "Put on a pair of slippers or that's going to kill our hydro bill." And the woman pulls the floor plan out of her purse, and we talk about it, and we close the business. So the woman drives the business. So knowing that, and are you selling direct? You know, when someone's coming in to evaluate your Montessori school, are you selling them like directly?
I do it directly, yeah.
Okay. So knowing that, what's something different that you can do in your sales pitch, getting clear that it's the woman driving the purchase decision? So what that could, if we go back to ACALing, is questions about, tell me about the dynamics in your family and what drop off and pickup looks like, or how do you both work outside of the house? How do you plan on managing? Is this your first child? Questions that, frankly, the woman's going to have the burden of answering, as I suspect, but that could be posed to both as well. So we're definitely on the right track there in terms of thinking about where I was at was thinking about all the things that your sales function can be doing, and trying to, again, discerning that cause and effect. Where's the highest and best use? Because sales can be a confusing, expensive part of your business, and the more you're thinking about what drives your business, the better you are, the more likely you are to have success with the sales function. All right, and finally, are there other ways to market? So you're all entrepreneurs, so I suspect you're all fairly creative and open to different approaches to distribution, but I wanted to tell you about one of ours as a learning lesson. So years ago, we got a call from a couple named Josh and Susie Whitcraft from Seattle. They wanted to come up to Vancouver and introduce themselves. Josh worked at an outfit called Art Tile, on new floors in the Seattle area, and had been exposed to Nuheat. His wife had just finished her master's in teaching, and they wanted to relocate back to Susie's hometown of Pittsburgh to start a life together, affordable housing, start a family, all that. And they wanted to take our business and become a mom and pop distributor of floor heat. So this is early in the days when our whole distribution model was over on the West Coast, so we had no one east of Chicago, and it seemed dumb, frankly, for them to invest all of their time, all of their energy in really high risk in creating a market that didn't exist already. But we saw the sense in it. It would effectively be a two-person sales team that wouldn't be on our payroll. So we really got behind it. We supported them with consigned inventory. We supported them with signage. We got out on the road with them. We supported them with leads from the trade shows that we weren't doing a great job of closing. And now they are our biggest customer in the Northeast, bigger than multi-branched flooring distribution chains or electrical wholesale houses. And it's just a wonderful story of how, had we not been open to that creative possibility and supported and nurtured it, it's a distributor and a huge customer now that wouldn't have existed. So I was afraid of this, that I'd be bumping up against time. Nonetheless, I had some bonus material that I absolutely had to share with you. So I read a study that blew me away once, and that is that the average adult wastes 2 hours a day, and the average sales professional wastes 4 hours a day. And it's actually not, if you've ever worked in professional sales, if you're not planning your day thoughtfully and you're spending a lot of windshield time, you can crank up the windshield time fairly quickly. Forget about getting sucked into the Facebook vortex or any other, creative ways of spending time. So what is the training that I recommend before sales training? Is any kind of time management training. There's a wonderful outfit in Vancouver called Priority Management that teaches a time management training, but there's also Franklin Covey. They all teach the same thing, is that of course you can't manage time. What you can manage is your priorities and then work on less things as opposed to more. So I highly recommend time management training for your sales function. Number 2 is, are you measuring results? Salespeople are a competitive type. They like to know where they stand versus their territory last year. They like to know where they stand against target. They like to know where they stand vis-a-vis the rest of the team. It's fun to keep score and it's fun to win for that kind of mindset. So I recommend active scorekeeping, measuring results to keep your sales team engaged and motivated. However, as the business owner, what matters much more is the activities that lead to results. So sales, we're going to get a sales report at 5 o'clock today that's sliced and diced by region and it's sliced and diced by product category, and it's borderline useless information because it's a lagging indicator. There's nothing I can do about those results that have come in or not come in. What I can do is discern what leads to revenue, and that happens to be quotes. When our quote pipeline is full, it's the best indicator of sales. What behavior drives more quotes? Talking to contractors. Therefore, measuring how many contractors our sales team is talking to over the course of the day, following up with, maintaining relationships with, building into our CRM database, that's the activity that leads to sales. That's a much more critical measure. For a 5, I said it already, but a desk is a terrible place from which to view the world. Please commit to me the next week that you will talk to a customer, you will ask a customer question, you will get on the road with your sales team and ask them what they need to do their job better. And finally, a thoughtful article that will get mailed out to you in Forbes last month was on inside sales. Outside sales are sales professionals that spend the majority of their time in the field. They have cars, they're out on the road, or they travel for their work. Customer service tends to be a purely inbound or passive affair. Inside sales is a growing phenomenon where they're mostly office-based, but in our case, they can talk to someone in Dallas, someone in Chicago, and someone in Delta on the same day, of course, because it's on the phone. It's cheaper than an outside sales function, and it can have ancillary benefits that you get from doing some work from home like our inside sales team does once a week. That is my presentation. My objective was that you had something concrete to work with on Monday, and I hope I've met it.